First day at boot camp. The camp commandant was escorted by a rather attractive, swarthy-looking young guardsman, who certainly did not look the part, dressed as he was in a cream-coloured jacket, finished off with a pink carnation as a buttonhole. Oh yes, he did wear other clothes besides: a dazzling white shirt, a pair of beige denim trousers, and a pair of bright red shoes, made of shiny patent leather. To cap it all, he was draped with a goose-feathered scarf, which really stole the show. He was certainly quite a spectacle to behold and admire, but it seemed that the assembled company only had eyes for the commandant, clad somewhat by drab contrast in army fatigues, not at all suitable for an inspection parade, but there he was. What did this motley collection of individuals standing in front of the commandant, whom we shall call Montmorency, have in common? Well, they had been carefully selected into batches, just like chickens, for what could coyly be termed readjustment back into society. They had all been placed in groups without any explanation as yet. They had been allowed to bring only one small suitcase each. Everything else would be kept under lock and key, and they had been promised they could retrieve those items which were considered appropriate for their new lives from henceforth. The ultimate decision would be made on their behalf, and there would be no questions asked or complaints expressed. Well, listeners, you must be curious to know the purpose of this enterprise, for enterprise it surely was. It had a good track record with almost 100% success rate at the end of the training or course, or whatever you might call it. It was government run and had the backing of all the most eminent and well-heeled in the country. It had been a long, hard struggle to popularize them and bring the electorate on board, but they had eventually got the support of the vast majority of the people, barring a hardcore of diehards and stick-in-the-muds who craved the good old days, which in fact weren't all that good anyway. Now, it's important to understand camps such as this were situated in remote locations from where it would be well-nigh impossible to make a successful bid for what was supposedly considered freedom. Any locals would spot anything unusual and would immediately contact the police about any suspicious person or persons roaming around their closely knit community and familiar surroundings. The camps did not in any shape or form resemble those we're used to seeing in war movies. They were meant to be places where those who stayed would be treated as honoured guests, with all the amenities they would anticipate for a comfortable standard of living. Coupled with that, they were expected to follow the course of training to the letter. There were no punishments as such, just suggestions as to how beneficial making an effort would be in the long run for them. Some took a while before they saw the sense of going along with what was planned. Today, the previous contingent had all passed with flying colours and were all placed to be successfully integrated and were well placed to be successfully integrated into a thriving progressive society. They had all left the camp empty, and this had been given a thorough clean-up for the next batch of guests, who now stood facing Montmorency, most in awkward silence, some quietly grumbling as to why they'd been picked out for special treatment. Montmorency must have heard that last comment as he gazed over everyone. "Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Camp Gorgeous, where you've been specially selected to undergo, or rather follow, a program of lectures, seminars and workshops to equip you to be better citizens in our fabulous Rainbow Nation." Montmorency winked and chortled his way through the little speech. As he surveyed his audience, he spotted a few especially suitably good-looking candidates who had first hesitated to respond to his blown kisses, and then whose faces, without exception, turned bright pink Others began to grow restless, and some even showed utter disgust at his effrontery and lack of shame. Oh, for him it was just par of the course. Water off a duck's back if you want. Gentlemen, I give you Hamish. What a fine specimen of humanity he is, don't you all agree? Hamish, give us a twirl. With that, the dashing young man sashayed round as though he was modelling his entire outfit, perhaps from the inside as well as on the outside. You'll be seeing more of dear Hamish over the coming weeks. Fear not. Do not disturb your lovely selves. He is gentle and can't hurt a fly. Which reminds me, everyone, gentlemen, check those flies down below to see that nothing's hanging out. Good, that's settled. Montmorency was enjoying himself. He could see that some were distinctly showing signs of discomfort due to an emotion they could not control. He was already making wonderful progress as he secretly complimented himself on his timing and the consequent display at such an early stage of development. Gentlemen, I hope we can henceforth all be friends and really get on well with each other, just as I do with Hamish. Now, let's get down to business. After all, that's what you're all here for. He gave a snigger, something resembling a sniff and a cough together, which was both for his benefit and for those who were listening, perhaps inviting them to join in even at this point of the proceedings. He wanted them to be totally relaxed in their minds, even though their bodies might have to catch up a bit later. That is, after the initial excitement. You will all be assigned a hut according to, shall we say, your proven disposition. You're already in those groups, so you should have no trouble in locating where you'll be for the next few weeks. I can guarantee fun and games during the course of those weeks, when you will discover things about yourselves you never knew existed. Once you find these things, and they won't be hard to spot, I promise, you can indulge yourselves to your heart's content. As I said, you'll be seeing more of Hamish as we go along. In fact, Hamish has a bunch of friends, just as handsome as he undoubtedly is, as I'm sure you will agree. And you'll be meeting and getting to know them as well. Don't worry, none of you will be left out. You'll all be catered for. Hamish, dear, I can see they aren't content with just one twirl. Perform your big number, my lovely. This time more eyes latched on the young man, who, after divesting himself of his jacket and shoes, proceeded to cavort and twist through a sinuous, provocative dance to a soundtrack which only he was privileged to hear. The movement seemed to go on forever, until Montmorency winked at him, and he came to a stop with his arms outstretched. At first there was complete silence. Then magically a ripple of applause came from parts of the assembled company. Not all, mind you. Others just scowled and seemed to be grinding their teeth. Well, on first impressions, it wasn't a bad start for Montmorency, was it? Who dismissed the men and turned back to enter his own hut in order to have a lie down, but not necessarily to sleep. He was very content with his lot.